Well, the little live button just popped up, so I guess we're live and ready to go. This is the Senate Agricultural Committee, Friday morning, February 19th. And this morning, to start with, we're going to discuss our on-farm composting bill, better known to a lot of people as the chicken bill. And we took testimony earlier this week, and there were a few items that needed to get adjusted between the Agency of Natural Resources and the Agency of Agriculture. And I believe they've been working on getting that balanced out and straightened out so that both agencies feel comfortable with the draft. And I know Michael, legal counsel, has been working on updating those, but I'd like to, I guess, welcome Kathy Jameson and Carrie Jaguar back to the committee. And maybe before we get to Michael, Kathy, would you like to give us your side of the issue and how it's worked out, and then we'll go to Carrie for a response, and then to Michael to run through the change.
Sure. So we have been working very collaboratively with the Agency of Ag since we last met. And just this helps me remember, we had, basically two parts of the proposal. The part that we had all discussed and agreed upon that represents pretty much what was in S-265 last year. We're not proposing any changes to that.
Yeah.
And the Agency of Ag has a proposal, and this is where I probably should let Carrie describe that, but it's a broader soil amendment fertilizer program that would provide them appropriate oversight of materials that are used on agricultural lands. That's the part we've been discussing over the last couple of days. We are in agreement, I think, on everything in that proposal, except one thing. And we're really close. And I think we have some language that we could perhaps, and I don't want to put any words in Carrie's mouth, but so I'll say the Agency of Natural Resources has language that we could offer that I think would deal with that last remaining issue. And so that's just setting the table. So the issue is that the Agency of Natural Resources has oversight of composting facilities in Vermont. The first part of the bill, certain on-farm composting would go to Agency of Ag, but we'll still have, A&R still going to have, and will continue to have oversight of composting facilities and that are not on farms, or the bigger ones, right? And they are generating product. And the one thing we want clarity on in this bill is that the Agency of Ag's oversight of soil amendments, particularly when it's these compost products coming from solid waste managed facilities, that their oversight is with respect to agricultural uses. And Carrie has a better way of saying that, and I'll let him share that. However, A&R still wants to retain jurisdiction over what these materials need to be as far as the quality when these materials are used elsewhere. And elsewhere could be on industrial sites, brownfield sites, public works, roadside mediums, non-agricultural uses. So we just want clarity about that one issue.
Yeah, I think, I read over your proposed changes, and, I thought that made sense, but we'll get Carrie on and see if that's a workable solution. Carrie?
Good morning, committee, and thank you, Chair. It does. It took me a little bit of conversation and back and forth with Kathy to understand exactly what it was we were stuck on. And my issue was that I couldn't conceive of any compost facilities currently not making a product that you wouldn't use in agriculture. And Kathy pointed out that as we move forward with universal recycling, we may be seeing compost facilities that are producing a product that isn't destined for ag at all. And instead of having that regulated by the Agency of Ag, it stays regulated as a product through the DEC's compost program. And that made a lot of sense when Kathy explained it that way. And I agree with the changes that she proposed late last night. I don't think it's in the current draft, but I agree with drawing those lines a little brighter in the sand. And it's fine. I just needed to understand what it is exactly we were talking about, and I now do.
Right. And I think as the compost, facilities, we have more and more of them, there's going to be a need for them to fill different markets. And I think we're kind of getting close to saturating the high quality compost market. And so I definitely envision that there'll be, compost facilities where the material isn't maybe as fine, it's a little bit more porous or whatever. It's perfect for public works or, industrial sites, but it just wouldn't be something you would want on an ag field.
Yeah. Are there questions from Chris?
Would it help me just to picture what you're talking about? So you're talking about like fill, potentially.
Well, no, compost has a lot of organic material. I think it would make a good fill because over time that organic material would decompose and you'd have slumping. That wouldn't be good, right? But it's more like if you had a large site that needed, let's say capping a landfill, and you have to have a vegetative cover on top, that grows grass because that's what you want. That would be a good use of it, right?
Yeah.
But you would never consider that ag land, right?
No, that I thought that was when I read your suggestion, I thought it made sense. We don't want to be checking, non-ag places anyways. We want to have the staff, the expertise. We'd probably have the expertise, but certainly not the staff to do that. And why have two agencies doing basically the same thing? Each of you have your jurisdictions and jobs, and the important thing is that you folks work together and get the job done in a proper way. Michael, are there any other questions from the members? If not, we'll move on. Michael, do you have the suggestive changes?
Kathy, did anything change from what you sent me?
The one I sent you late yesterday evening is the most current one, and it had two options in it because Michael is a pro at wording it appropriately. I am not. I figured if I gave him two options, he could buff up one of them.
So yeah, there's language that can be added. It would go into what I will call the fertilizer chapter under the most likely the definition sections in the definition of soil amendment. And it'll be a 1 or 2 line addition to a 41 page bill. 41 page amendment.
Pretty small addition. Chris?
Are we going to lose Kathy and Carrie as we walk through it, or I'm just curious what the plan is?
I can stay if you want, but the 41 pages is mostly Carrie's. It's all Carrie.
What I'd like to do is is go through it and try to get it finalized. So, and then Michael can fill in where the new sentence or paragraph's gonna be, roughly. And then we would come back. I mean, I'd like to, we've got to get this printed up and shipped to Natural Resources. And so I'd like to, I don't know if we'd be ready to vote it today, but I'd like to certainly vote it to send it to print. So early next week, we could forward this to Natural Resources once it gets printed up, if that's agreeable with the committee. So why don't we may as well start right at the beginning and run through it quickly, Michael. And we all know it. Well, Corey wasn't with us last year, but he was in Natural, so he's familiar with the language to some degree as well. But we may as well start right at the beginning and run right through it. And if any of you have questions, raise your hand or speak up.
So Senator Starr, when you say start at the beginning, do you mean start at the 41 page beginning or start at the previous bill that was basically the reproduction of S265 from last year?
Well, I think the first part, the part we did last year, we can just do a quick review of that. And then when we get to the new part that we're adding, then we've got to kind of slow down and do it the normal way.
Okay.
Would that work?
That works. I did not send you the part that you did from last year. I can do that right now.
Well, I printed my copy off from something that somebody sent.
It's on our website, right?
Yeah, I believe. I don't think Kelly changed anything from what she gave you previously. I think Kelly's on, so she can opine on that.
Good morning, Kelly.
Good morning, Senator Starr. That's correct, Michael. I have not changed anything from the draft that is on the committee's website.
Okay. Well, I will. Kelly, do you want to walk through the first part, the S265 part, or do you want me to do it?
I can give the committee the quick walkthrough if that's helpful at this point.
Sure.
Yeah, that would be great.
But could I find it on our website?
I just sent it to you, Anthony,
Okay.
Senator
Okay.
Plina. It may come in without a subject line because I just was working quickly.
I got it.
I just put it in the chat if anybody wants it.
I got it.
12 pages, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's correct. Would you like me to share my screen as I go through this or just talk you through the different sections?
Doesn't really matter.
Just
You know,
talk through it.
I think if there's would you like it on the screen, guys?
No,
We
No,
have it here.
I think we're fine, Kelly, unless we have a question, then you could pop that section up.
Okay, that sounds good. So as Michael mentioned, this is primarily a rerun of S265 from last year with only a couple very minor technical changes and a date change to the reporting deadline. But to walk through the different sections, the first section of the draft would amend the definition of farming under Act 250, which is the principal definition of farming that's used in the statute, including for the RAPs, required agricultural practices. So the first section of the bill would provide that farming includes the importation of 2,000 cubic yards per year or less of food residuals or food processing residuals onto a farm for production of compost. And that's provided that the compost is principally used on the farm where it is produced. And there's a definition of that provided. under the same section, or that the compost is produced on a small farm that raises or manages poultry. And then also under section 1, there are several definitions, including a farm, food processing residuals, food residuals, and as I mentioned, principally used, as well as small farm. So all those definitions are drawn from existing sources of current law. Sorry. And so that's section 1. Section 2 would amend the required agricultural practices rule and include the same definition of farming that I mentioned in section 1. Section 3 would establish an agricultural residuals management program at the Agency of Agriculture to manage this residual waste. And then section 4 through 6 would just make amendments to ANR's existing solid waste authority to clarify that the farms that are producing compost under the provisions that I outlined in section 1 would not be subject to ANR's solid waste management authority. And then section 7 provides an interim application of the solid waste management rule to say that prior to the adoption of the rules that the Agency of Agriculture is to adopt for the importation of food residuals, that the Agency of Ag shall require a person producing compost on a farm with food residuals to comply with ANR's accepted composting practices. And then section 8 would just provide that the Secretary of Agriculture and the Secretary of Natural Resources would submit testimony to the General Assembly on or before January 15, 2023, regarding the importation of food residuals onto farms for the purpose of compost production. And then the final section, section 9, is just stating that the act takes effect on passage. So that's a really quick run through. I'm happy to discuss in more detail any one of those sections or to put the language up if that's useful.
No, and the only change would the effective date, wouldn't that would be struck and put at the end of the bill, I would presume.
The effective date is currently at the end of the bill. That's right, section 9,
Yeah.
that the act will take effect on passage.
Yep. Good, everybody, Chris?
Kelly or Michael or even Carrie, there's this small subset of chicken farmers that are deeply impacted by this. And so the ANR gave them an extension, lease on life last year by letter that expires, I want to say, in June. So if this becomes law before that expiration, are we all set? Or do we have to handle the lag time with rules and all that sort of stuff?
So, and maybe Michael can add to what I'm about to say, but section 7 of the bill as it's currently drafted provides for the application of interim solid waste management rules. So after this bill is passed, but while the Agency of Agriculture is in the process of drafting rules, a person producing compost on a farm would have to comply with sections 61101 through 61111 of ANR's Vermont Solid Waste Management Rules. So while the Agency of Agriculture is drafting rules, there is an interim procedure specified under this section 7 that the solid waste management rules of ANR would apply.
And I guess more specifically, my question is, they just have to comply with those. That's not sort of, they have to take it upon themselves to comply, correct? As opposed to they're not actually engaging with ANR. ANR is not inspecting if they want to get set up, anything, any of that.
So there are existing procedures specified under that section of ANR solid waste management rules. Michael, do you want to add on to this?
Sure, Chris, the Agency of Ag will be implementing and enforcing those provisions for those farms. They won't have to, the farms won't have to engage with ANR. It's basically saying that the interim standards for ag are what are in ANR's rules. And the I can't remember which farmers were in last year. They went through and looked at 1101 through 1111. They're not entirely ecstatic to have to follow those provisions, but they say that that can be done. It's acceptable. Maybe Caroline or someone else could further opine on that, but I think it's a good interim step to the final rule.
But
That satisfies me. I just want to make sure we weren't tripping over ourselves here.
And that was in the bill prior, that's been in the bill from day one. And, I mentioned it several times to Natural Resources that we weren't, because they were asking, well, did you make any changes to the bill that we had last year? And I said, no, we just added on to better protect our soils and do a better job in having better soils into the future with those changes. So I'd rather not tinker with that. I think it's a minute, issue. So, Michael, you want to run through the new stuff and go from the where Pat Kelly left off?
Okay. I'm going to share my screen.
Yep.
And it'll take me a minute to get to what I need to get to. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So generally, what this language, well, let me step back. I think you all know that the Agency of Agriculture already regulates commercial feeds, and it already regulates fertilizer. And generally the two programs or two chapters follow a similar system. They require the manufacturer, distributor of the product to register, pay a fee, and then there are standards for the quality, labeling, and other provisions for the product. So what is being proposed in this new language is that additional products would be added to each chapter for registration and regulation by the agency. Under the commercial feeds chapter, the new products would be animal health products, which is defined on the first page as any product marketed to prevent or cure or enhance or protect the health or well-being of livestock, poultry, or other domestic animals that does not provide nutrition, does not require a prescription from a licensed veterinarian, is not intended for cosmetic purposes, or is exempted by the secretary by rule. So that would be a new product that would require registration and regulation by the agency. The other new product would be feed supplements. And a feed supplement is a material used with another to improve the nutritive balance or performance of the total and intended to be fed undiluted as a supplement to other feeds or offered free choice with other parts of the ration separately available or further diluted and mixed to produce a complete feed. So then the
Mr. Chair.
remaining.
Chris?
Yeah, sorry, Michael, but I just want to make sure, this is probably a stupid question, but we took great care in the food scraps language to be sure that we were not tangling with feed, right? With definitions of feed and all of that. And so would we be worried that we're putting them in the same bill? I mean, maybe that's idiotic to ask, but I remember us having that as a great concern last year.
Well, it was of great concern last year, but the ultimate resolution doesn't really address feed at all. What how these two interact And Carrie might be a better person to tell you how he envisions the language you reviewed last year and just reviewed with Kelly and this language. But remember, you create a residuals program underneath the language you just reviewed with Kelly. And that program is going to need resources, staff and otherwise. And so the agency generally pays for its programs, many of its programs, not all of this, many of its programs with fees. And so this is partly going to be used to fund the residuals management program.
Yeah.
And Carrie, do you want to supplement that?
You captured it, Mike. But essentially these are products that are currently orphaned. The document I sent earlier, there are a number of states that do register animal supplements. Companies send their products and their labels to us for registration, and we send their check and their labels back because we don't have authority to register feed supplements. This just captures what the companies are already trying to do and provides seed funding for some of the projects that we would like to see happen with the residuals management program. Right now we're using pesticide program funds to test ag commodities for PFAS. That could essentially in the future come out of the funding that's being listed in this bill to support the residuals management program.
And I'm going to unshare my screen for a second because I want to kind of address the question of feed. You didn't fully eliminate that question. If farms are going to be importing food residuals, there are FDA rules for the use of food residuals as animal feed on a farm. Primarily, the overarching umbrella one is that it can't be adulterated. You can't eliminate those requirements. They're FDA federal requirements, and in addition, they are incorporated through a statutory cross-reference as Vermont's rules as well. So farmers are still going to have to navigate that. And there's still potential enforcement, and there's still potential liability if they're feeding their animals adulterated feed.
Would that be regulated by the feds somehow, Michael?
Well, the feds do have that authority, but
Yeah.
It's primarily, in my opinion, going to be regulated by the Agency of Agriculture. You know,
And that,
FDA. Go ahead.
sorry, Mike, but that Food Safety Modernization Act is really what brought us to the situation we're in, and you having to draft this bill, with the fact being we couldn't call it feed. We were willing to go with allowing chickens access to compost or chickens that forage on compost piles as a solution, but that solution didn't satisfy all the pieces that folks have asked for over the years. So I think we've gotten closer, but that the passage of the Food Safety Modernization Act is why we're here today, and that's those sort of handcuffs that the agency was wearing with regard to what is and isn't a feed in the adulteration piece and the good manufacturing practice requirements. All of that is what landed us here today talking about this bill.
Well, what basically, eventually, eventually we may have to make some updates to this bill as we move forward but you think we're in the best shape we can be in at the present time to go forward, or do you have a suggested change, Michael?
I don't have a suggested change, but I wanted to bring you back to what the language that Kelly just reviewed with you does. When the question came up about the use of food residuals for feed and in composting, there was the question of whether or not that shifted the regulatory authority over those operations from the Agency of Ag to A&R, and what that shift meant in terms of the general regulatory structure of farming on those farms. Would it jeopardize their Act 250 exemption? Would it jeopardize their land use exemption? Would it subject them to additional environmental regulations, et cetera? That anxiety about what that meant was kind of what generated the bill that's in front of you. And by defining farming in the way that you do, that importation of that fairly discrete amount of food residuals over the year and for the purposes that are delineated, that now is farming, and that keeps those operations under the umbrella of the Agency of Agriculture and provides those operations with all the benefits that farming receive in the state, and they don't have to interface with A&R. Those operations still have to navigate multiple other provisions of law, water quality, labor, compliance with the RAPs. So this is not a wand that you're waving that cures all ills or all regulatory burdens.
I don't think we ever intended to have a wand do that.
Right.
We want this to be done properly. If somebody's going to do it, to be done environmentally sound and proper. So, I think that's good.
So I'll go back to the other bill.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Can you see it?
Yep.
All right. So the second new product that's going to be regulated under the commercial feed chapter would be feed supplements. So I already read through that. I won't read through it again.
Right.
But hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. And then most of the remaining changes are conforming changes throughout the chapter. And because the chapter is fairly long, you have fairly a significant amount of conforming changes. The one other significant change is the fee. So you'll see that there's a registration and fee for commercial feed, and now it'll include feed supplements or animal health products. You'll see that there's a prohibition on distributing these products unless they're registered. And then there's the fee. It's $105 per product for commercial feed or feed supplements, and similarly, it's going to be $105 for the animal health products. The funds are deposited into a special fund, 6 VSA 364, and going to be used for implementation of this chapter, but the agency also has some discretion to use those funds for other purposes.
Now, maybe this question's for Carrie. Is that $105 the fee that's already being charged, or is that a brand new fee?
It is the fee that is currently on the books. That's the price to register a feed in the state. We're not proposing to change it at all.
Yeah, okay.
Is that
But
an
you are-
annual fee?
Yes.
Thank you.
Chris?
Does this apply also to stuff that people buy for their dogs and cats in the pet store, or is it only in the ag universe?
It is pet food products as well, Chris. And the animal nutrient supplements, a lot of those are designed for dogs and cats. You see the joint supplement, the glucosamine chondroitin products for dogs. This captures those as well.
But the $105 is the same fee that we've been charging for these items in the past. So that's not an increase in.
Correct. That
Yeah,
is
You've been charging the $105 for commercial feed. You haven't been charging the $105 for feed supplements or animal health products.
Yeah.
So, right. So like the salmon oil for your dog, that's not commercial feed, but it's a feed supplement or maybe even an animal health product. That will now have to pay a $105 annual registration fee.
And
Chris?
Carrie, you mentioned that some of these manufacturers have been trying to be registered as though they were feed. Is that they I assume are, it's hard for them to navigate all the states, but some of them wouldn't mind being considered feed. Is that what's going on? So I guess that's one question. And you said they're sending you a check. Are they already sending you $105 because they're trying or thinking they come in under the feed regs?
They have been trying to come in under the feed regs for years, Senator Pearson, because there is an advantage to having a regulated product about where you can distribute it. And what's been happening with sort of the nutritional supplement products, if there is protein, fat, or fiber in there, they'll put that protein, fat, or fiber guarantee on it and register it as a feed, even though it's like Mr. O'Grady described salmon oil. They'll put a fat guarantee on salmon oil and register it as a feed. But really what they're trying to accomplish is this is a nutritional supplement. So it's a process for getting those products under a regulatory umbrella that they already are halfway under.
And
Yep.
would-
I
I'm
think
think-
Corey
oh, sorry.
had a question, I think.
Yeah, I think it was kind of answered. I was going to ask, what's the compliance of getting folks to comply with this? Because I know my dog uses salmon oil, but it sounds like a company would kind of seek out the registration from what I'm hearing.
They do, yep. Yep, we already have a relationship with the companies that do produce these products.
Okay, thank you.
Chris?
I'm foreshadowing the discussion I would likely have to have in finance if this goes forward. So I don't need it right now, but are we able to assemble some universe of what's going on in other states? Because I think it was mentioned we're not alone in doing this. A bunch of other states already do it. Can you just, or
Yep.
maybe give us some context, or down the road, that would really help me.
I did send that to Linda Lehman 2 weeks ago, and Chris, I'll send it to you personally.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, Michael?
Okay, moving on.
Yeah.
So you'll see that there are labeling requirements, and we make conforming changes to that, including what's going to be on the label of the new products. You'll see what's going to be on the label of the animal health products, and Then there's misbranding prohibitions, and we make conforming changes to add feed supplements or animal health products there. There's adulteration provisions. So that's been added. And one of the things, another significant change is there's a tonnage reporting requirement that the manufacturers are supposed to provide, but the report was only in 2016 and 2017. So a question for you is, do you still want these manufacturers to report tonnage? I think the agency finds it really difficult to do this considering the different types of products. So they're proposing to have it struck, but that's ultimately your decision.
Well, I was wondering on that, some of that product probably comes through in ounces or, gallons and liquid. It might not, I don't know how you would measure it by tonnage. Carrie, what was your thinking behind striking that tonnage language?
Yep, there was a requirement that we collect feed tonnage for, I think, 2 years. We've collected it for 4. I've provided that report. Nobody's asked any questions about it. I'll send that report to the committee again. But as far as the animal or pet food products, we aren't really concerned with the tonnage reporting of pet food products.
Yeah. Committee good with that? Chris, you have a question?
I think I'm good with that. We still have the data, right? You'd still be, if we got curious, I'm assuming you would be able to collect it. It's just the reporting requirement.
No, we don't collect feed tonnage. Normally, we do collect fertilizer tonnage annually,
Yeah.
and there's a fee associated with that. But this provision a few years ago required that we collect feed tonnage data for 2 years. Currently, we've collected it for 4 years. We have it. I can provide that to the committee.
Well, has it provided any value to the agency or anyone to collect all that? I mean, is there a purpose for collecting it, or we just
Well,
want?
I think what you were interested in, Senator, was to see how much phosphorus we are importing through feed.
Yeah, and we've had the feed folks in earlier, and that's been cut way down from, I don't know, seven something to 4 or 4.5. They're reducing that all the time, according to the feed guys we had in earlier this year. So if there's no objection, we'll leave that out. We'll cross that out. So good. Okay, Michael. Yeah.
Moving on. That pretty much is the commercial feed changes. There's a couple more conforming changes. But those are the significant changes. And then you will get to the fertilizer and lime. So the agency currently registers fertilizer and agricultural lime, and what would be added as additional products would be biostimulants, plant amendments, and soil amendments. And similar to the previous chapter, they would pay a fee. They would register and pay a fee. So let's look at the definition of biostimulants. Substance or microorganism that, when applied to seeds, plants, or the rhizosphere, stimulates natural processes to enhance or benefit nutrient uptake, nutrient efficiency, tolerance to abiotic stress, or crop quality and yield, except for fertilizers, soil amendments, plant amendments, or pesticides. Then you get There's a definition of exceptional quality biosolids, because that's going to come into play, and the definition of soil amendment. And this is the definition that ANR provided, and it's consistent with their regulatory authority. I'm not going to walk you through that. Then there is the definition of plant amendment. Any substance applied to plants or seeds that is intended to improve growth, yield, product quality, reproduction, flavor, or other favorable characteristics of plants, except for fertilizer, soil amendments, ag liming materials, animal and vegetable manures, pesticides, plant regulators, and other materials exempted by rule adopted under this chapter. And then you will get to the definition of soil amendment. Substance or mixture of substances that is intended to improve the physical, chemical, biological, or other characteristics of the soil, except fertilizers, ag liming, unprocessed animal manures, unprocessed vegetable manures, pesticides, biostimulants, and other materials exempted by rule. And this is where the language that ANR and the Agency of Ag have been negotiating. Right now, it says an exceptional quality biosolid product marketed and distributed for use in the production of an ag commodity is a soil amendment unless specifically registered under this chapter as a fertilizer. Now, I believe that Kathy and Carrie have discussed changing that language to something similar, such as compost products from facilities under the jurisdiction of the solid waste management rules are not considered soil amendments under this chapter unless marketed and distributed for the use in the production of an agricultural commodity. So that's essentially the language that the two agencies were discussing last night.
And this is where you would add that new language?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I wasn't expecting this, but I was expecting it to happen later. The agritourism bill is on the floor of the House and is being reported right now. I think I need to go support that reporter. I think, Kelly, can you walk through the rest of this? It's really just the fee, $85 for the registration, and then the conforming changes for registration, the labeling. There is still a tonnage fee provision in this because the agency still wants to get reporting on tonnage. And that's really it. The rest of it is conforming changes to incorporate the new products under the regulation of the agency.
What? Well, we'll let you go to run over to help the House. But when could we get that new language added, Michael, so we could get it to, to print this bill in bill form?
Well, it would be a committee bill, so we would just need to add it into the language that Kelly reviewed for you. It's been edited. So we would just need to make the change that ANR and the Agency of Ag agreed to. And then you would need to deliver it to the drafting operation so they could send it to print. We would probably have it for you by Tuesday.
So when would we get it back from? See, what we got to do is get that shipped to Natural Resources, so they've got the week, sometime next week or the following week to review it and move it to finance. So we need to get this, done as soon as we can.
Right. So it's a committee bill, right? So it'll get sent right to the floor.
And then we'll refer it to.
You'll refer it to Natural Resources.
Yeah.
You would want to probably talk to the secretary about whether or not he can considers the crossover deadlines to apply to it. He probably will, but I'm not going to speak for him.
No,
And then it just would probably need to get out of Senate Natural by the crossover deadline. And then goes to finance by rule.
so then we've got another week, so we're good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Chris,
Thank you, Michael. I see Caroline has a question. I don't
Yeah.
know if you're open to taking that, but maybe when
yeah.
we're,
I wanted to get Michael in before he had to leave on timing.
Okay. And I apologize. I didn't know that they were going to start reporting this early.
Michael.
Yeah. They plan on doing stuff to screw us up over on the health side.
yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. Caroline, did you have a question before we move on?
Yes, thank you, Senator Starr. And for the record, Caroline Gordon with Rural Vermont. Hi, Kelly. Hi, Kathy. I have a question for you both. Just wondering how the proposed added language about jurisdiction remaining by A&R for compost generated not for agricultural use. When the poultry farmers I'm working with sell the compost for residential use, how would that interact then jurisdiction wise? What would be that scenario?
Are you still with us, Kathy?
Um,
I don't think it would affect.
Yes, I am.
Caroline.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to hear from Carrie, because if that's for garden use, I was assuming that would probably still need to meet the agricultural standards. Is that correct, Carrie?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
this would, it wouldn't capture the dual marketed products.
Mhm.
A composter currently in operation that meets all the A&R standards that would potentially fall under ag with a soil amendment that can go to either ag or non-ag uses. The carve out that I think Kathy was interested in is the folks making compost with no interest in selling that as a soil amendment for agriculture, for nursery production, for any sort of nursery or vegetable start. So
Right.
this would be the folks that are, and as I'm understanding it, as we move forward with the universal recycling bill, there may be facilities that have no interest in producing an ag commodity, a compost, a soil amendment, just on the sort of waste management side. They're diverting organics from the landfill and producing a compost that could potentially be used to cap landfills to get involved in AOT projects, that type.
Right, but my understanding is if it's being used for residential gardens or whatnot, that it would still need to meet the ag standards.
Yep. Does that
Thank-
answer your question, Caroline?
Yeah, I think it does. Thank you both.
Yeah.
And just really quickly, as Kathy and I had sort of drawn the line, Caroline, the folks that are producing compost now are really involved in the high-end market of soil amendments and compost products. They've really captured the high end of that market. This would be for the low end of the market, just to ensure that A&R would continue to regulate them and they wouldn't slip through the cracks.
Yep.
Or if we set a standard for a soil amendment that was too high, that these other composts couldn't meet because of the way they were made, there is still an avenue for those to be land applied. That was really what Kathy's, that's what sold me right there.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. Chris, did you have a question?
Yeah, my question is for Carrie. Now that we would be allowing feed supplements and soil enhancements to be registered and sort of certified in that sense, do we then own any, does the state sort of saying these work? I mean, there's a lot of,
Snake oil.
dubious products out there, particularly in the pet world, I'm sure. So just talk to me about that. Are we giving it a stamp of approval, or how do we protect ourselves, or is that just not even an issue?
No, it is, Senator, and that's the sort of design concept behind all of this. There has to be a level of efficacy that's understood when those products are registered. Right now, they're not registered, they're not regulated. You can provide any snake oil magic pill you want, and nobody's looking at what's in that product. It's currently, that had been true in the pet food or pet animal supplement market for a long time, but with the NASC, the National Animal Supplement Council, a lot of that has been eliminated, whereas the NASC is doing those studies that you're talking about. This works for that, this works for that. And if the NASC guidelines allow us to some assurance that these products are working. The other side of that right now is the soil supplement or the plant supplement. We have seen across the country products being sold with claims of, biostimulant claims that actually, and they're being sold under an organic label that actually have synthetic pesticides in there that do the job. And if those products aren't registered and regulated, we have no way of removing them from the shelf other than to refer them to the federal government. This allows us to test those products for the claims that they're making. Plant growth regulators make it into a lot of the specialty fertilizer market these days. And I think you understand that I'm talking about the sort of.
So with our new lab that we have, I mean, we are geared up so we can do this type of testing, I would hope. And so actually it's going to be a plus for our people that buy these items to make sure that they are somewhat what it says on the label, right? With the labeling law and.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not just an administrative thing. There's actually, you'll have to come up with standards, or you'll just hinge it to the national standard you were talking about.
Correct. And Senator, what really piqued my interest was a lot of the adulterated products that are being sold in the cannabis space in the Western states that have legalized. They're selling basically neem products, which is an organic fungicide and insecticide with chlorpyrifos in it. And because it's being sold as a leaf shine, the chlorpyrifos is actually doing the insecticide work, but it leaves a residue on the cannabis. And we've seen there are a number of products that in that space that are reaching the market that don't meet the current criteria, and they're being marketed as soil amendments. So they don't fall in the pesticide space, they don't fall in the fertilizer space, and we would largely have no reason to look at them because they're not registered, other than the fact that other states are finding them and letting us know they're adulterated. So we would have primary enforcement authority already over the products that we're seeing come in, making claims that are not substantiated by what's in the product, on the product label, but they do put synthetic plant growth regulators in there to get the desired effect. as well as, sorry to keep rambling here, but
Well, it's important for us to understand, some of these purposes, because I'm sure that, well, I'm not sure, but we could possibly get questions in regards to, well, why are you even doing this, and why is it important? And no, it's good to have this discussion, because we're gonna have to answer to somebody eventually.
and
So,
last year you heard from the biochar folks and
Yeah.
all the great things that biochar does. This legitimizes it as a product and would be incumbent upon the agency to have data on file that supports the claims that they're making. So it further, it provides that regulatory oversight and legitimizes the claims that the biochar companies are asking for.
Yep. So that's good. So we'll continue on. Kelly, was you gonna pick up here and where Michael left off?
Sure. Apologies, I've just been scrolling through to follow along with what Carrie was just testifying on, trying to find my place again.
Have we done the biosolids and Class A biosolids and through there?
I can
Kelly,
start there.
I
Carrie.
believe we were on the $85 fee for fertilizers.
Okay. Would you like me to share my screen?
Yeah, that would be helpful, I think.
Okay, I'm just getting that up now. Oops. Apologies, I just lost my place. Okay. Sorry about the technical difficulties. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to zoom in here and I'm having difficulties doing that. Okay, there we go. I apologize for the delays in that. So I'm just not having a good time with this where I'm at.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I've got it zoomed in and back on the $85 registration fee. So I thank you for the committee's patience with that. So as Carrie just mentioned, this would add a section that would include
364.
So we're in the portion of the bill that relates to soil amendments, and this is the registration fee for biostimulants, plant amendments, and soil amendments. I can go back a little bit earlier if that's helpful to resituate you.
No, I think we're good to go there, Kelly, with 364, the registration stuff.
Okay, great. So this adds biostimulants, plant amendments, and soil amendments to the registration requirement with the registration fee set at $85 per grade or formulation that is being registered, and then provides provisions for the application for each of those products.
Yeah, and maybe we should ask, it was $20 per nutrient and $140 per brand. And how did you come up with the 85? Is that somewheres between the two or Carrie, or where did that 85 number come from? How'd you arrive at it?
So that is the spot on average of what we get for a fee for fertilizer registration. It wouldn't change the funds coming in at all.
So that is the regular fee that you've been charging. That's not new or,
It is a change. Currently, there's currently the registration fee is per nutrient. So there'll be nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, all of those nutrients that are on the fertilizer label are a $20 fee up to $140. This just simplifies the book work, charges one fee for the registration of a fertilizer instead of anywhere between from 20 to 140.
yeah. And it would generate this basically same amount of revenue.
Yes, yep.
Yeah.
And that is on the, I will resend that sheet to Linda Lehman that breaks this down.
Yeah, are there questions
But
from,
it's designed to be revenue neutral.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're good to go.
And Senator Collmore, it simplifies it for the folks that are registering fertilizer in the state. They don't have to sit there and say $20 for this one, 140 for this one, 75 for this one, 80 for that one. It's just a flat fee.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. It'll be much easier for the suppliers to get to the end. So that should help them save time and money. Okay, Kelly.
Okay, great. So then moving on, the rest of the provisions here specify those procedures related to registration and to avoid duplication in registration. And
Yeah.
it also provides this language here on lines 10 and 11 on page 26 that the secretary may request additional proof of testing or products prior to registration for guaranteed analyses or adulterants to ensure that things are not misbranded or adulterated. So then continuing on, section 365, it's at the bottom of page 26, it starts on page 27, provides for the labeling of these type of products, and it adds to the existing language. So scrolling through, this is existing language that's currently in statute. And then on page 28, starting on line 4, it adds the provision for biostimulants, plant amendments, and soil amendments, and the labeling provisions for those products. So providing the information that you can see listed here.
Yep.
And then we just moved this provision related to time to come into compliance to the bottom here. And then moving on to the next page for tonnage fees. This is page 29. This is again existing language, and then it adds a provision stating that persons distributing a biostimulant, plant amendment, or soil amendment in the state shall report annually on or before January 15th for the previous year ending December 31st to the secretary, revealing the amounts of each formulation of biostimulant, plant amendment, or soil amendment, and the form in which the biostimulant, plant amendment, or soil amendment was distributed within the state. And then provides that each report shall include a written authorization allowing the secretary to examine the person's books for the purpose of verifying tonnage reports. Biostimulants, plant amendments, and soil amendments are exempt from tonnage fees. So it requires reporting of tonnage, but exempts from tonnage fees. And then
And Kelly, so farmer that is accepting a limited amount of food scraps to make compost would have to file this report. Is that right? Or only if they're selling some of it?
if they fall into the definitions and provisions of this draft language as defined here, in other words, if they have to register under the provisions of this chapter, then yes, they would fall into this reporting requirement. Carrie, do you want to speak to your intent on that?
Yeah, yes, Chris, they would have to report tonnage. All of our fertilizer, the entire fertilizer industry reports tonnage, but the fertilizer folks have to pay a fee. The soil amendment folks would have to also report tonnage because we do want to have a handle on how much Class A biosolid is coming into the state, for instance. Also, it's a initial bench audit for the composting facilities. You know, if they're producing way more compost than you've allowed, we would revisit how much food scraps that are coming onto the farm. But there's no fee associated with it, because while fertilizer tonnage fees make sense, the amount of tons of these products we're assuming is so large that there's no point in having a tonnage fee associated with it. We want to see this on ag land.
And do they have to report only if they're selling some of their compost? What if they're, some of them are using it for their chickens and to augment their own soil health? Do they have to report?
This is just distributed.
Okay.
On-farm compost, it wouldn't even need to be registered.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure I have an opinion. I just want to understand what we're looking at.
Yep. All set, Kelly?
Okay, so moving along, we're on the end of page 30 here. And then section 367, this would add to the existing language regarding inspection, sampling, and analysis, biostimulants, plant amendments, and lime that's distributed in the state.
Yep.
Again, these are just the conforming provisions to add biostimulant, plant amendment, and soil amendment to the existing language relating to inspection. And then similarly, the bottom of 31 and the start of page 32, there's a section on misbranding that's already been touched upon a little bit, but essentially this language just adds biostimulant, plant amendment, soil amendment to that existing provisions about misbranded. It also adds a provision here on line 7 of page 32 that it contains unsubstantiated claims. In other words, if a product makes claims that it cannot substantiate on its product labels, that constitutes misbranding. And then continuing along, similarly, section 369, it adds that existing language, again, biostimulant, plant amendment, soil amendment. And here, I think this language should be noted on page 33, lines 5 through 7, that the product, if it contains any deleterious or harmful ingredient in an amount sufficient to render it injurious to beneficial plant life when applied in accordance with directions for use on its label, or, and this is the new language, lines 5 through 7, or if uses of the product may result in contamination or condemnation of a raw agricultural commodity by use, or if adequate warning statements or directions for use that may be necessary to protect plant life are not shown on the label. So again,
Are there
this is
any
when
questions? Speak up, guys. Yep. Okay, Kelly.
Okay.
Maybe I do have a question, just overall, because we're looping in a bunch of products now that have to be registered. Is it inherent in that process that the agency can reject the registration? Just say, no, we're not going to. I'm assuming that, but I haven't seen it anywhere.
Yes, I'm about to proceed to that. That's later on in this language. And then at that point, Senator Pearson, if you have questions, I can answer those. Okay, so this is the adulteration section. And then at the bottom of this page, it adds, again, conforming amendments to the existing language on publication. And then it looks like Michael O'Grady has just rejoined us. So Michael, we are at the top of page 34. If you want to take back over the walkthrough, or happy to proceed how you want to.
Why don't you finish up? There's only 6 more pages.
Okay, so
Good
Continue.
training, Kelly.
it is for sure. Thank you, Senator. So continuing through these conforming amendments, then on page 35, lines 7 through the bottom of this page, it removes some older language. And then I don't know if Michael, if you wanted to say anything specifically to that section, otherwise I can just keep going.
No, that is, there was a public information requirements about the use of fertilizers when you banned phosphorus in residential turf. So this is just getting rid of that old requirement.
Okay, so proceeding on the end of page 35 and the beginning of page 36, it just is the rules authorization for the secretary to adopt rules necessary to implement. And then section 372 just continues on. This is all just existing law. This isn't being changed. That's just added here for reference. And then section 374, again, conforming amendments, adding biostimulant, plant amendment, and soil amendment to the existing language related to short weight.
Yep.
And then Senator Pearson, this is the language that I was referencing, where this adds to section 375, cancellation of registration, that states that the secretary is authorized to cancel or suspend the registration of any fertilizer, biostimulant, plant amendment, soil amendment, or lime, or refuse a registration application if he or she finds that the provisions of this chapter or the rules adopted under this chapter have been violated, provided that no registration shall be revoked or refused without a hearing before the secretary. And then on that same vein, section 376 adds to the existing section on withdrawal from distribution orders, biostimulant, plant amendment, soil amendment, such that when the secretary has reasonable cause to believe one of those products is being distributed in violation of any of the provisions of this chapter or any of the rules, they can issue and enforce a written or printed withdrawal from distribution order. So again, this is just conforming amendments to that existing authority that the secretary has for fertilizer or lime under the current statute. Does that answer your question, Senator Pearson, from earlier? Okay.
I guess it does spark another question though. There's a bunch of these products that are on the shelf right now. Is there some place in here where we handle that lag, or for current what's inventory, or how does that handle? How do we handle that?
Michael, do you mind jumping in?
Sure. Yeah. So it's an annual registration, right? And so the next registration period, so they're not required to be registered right now, and they won't be required to be registered until the agency's next registration period.
And Carrie, when is the next registration period?
So they do stagger.
Oh, okay.
Our pesticide registrations are in November. Our feed is, well, Fertilizer is March and April, and our feeds are after that.
Well, no matter when we have it, there will be some products on the shelf.
That will.
So how do you handle that?
Yeah,
Yep, and you know, Senator Pearson, there would be education outreach to the companies that produce these products. First of all, that they do need to be registered, and we do a significant amount of marketplace inspections. We regulate the entities that put these products on the shelf fairly significantly there, because they do sell generally feed, seed, fertilizer, and class A or B pesticides. So we're in these stores frequently.
Well, so do we have to, if I own a little pet store or a pet section of my general store, and this has taken effect and we're after the registration deadline, do I have to take unregistered products off, or am I allowed to sell them off?
We would work with the registrant, not necessarily the store, but the company that produces the product to get that product registered. It's not the responsibility of the store owner to make sure that product is registered. It's the manufacturer's responsibility.
Okay, thank you.
So the phrase withdraw from distribution is not the same as, for instance, cease and desist.
Technically, the agency has cease and desist authority under their general enforcement authority, so they could use that general enforcement if someone wasn't complying with the withdrawal order or similar order. That's when you would see a exercise by the agency of its general enforcement authority.
Okay, thank you.
and that would still be placed on the manufacturer, I would presume, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you really want to be clear, we could add a retail inventory exception, or it's really, it's not even an exception. It's because it's the retailer doesn't have the responsibility.
As long as the responsibility is upstream from them, I'm okay.
Yeah, and I think it's better to just talk, we're talking about the manufacturer and the distributor all the way through. We haven't even mentioned retail, and that maybe could cause confusion if we put that in, and because we want to make sure that we only hit the manufacturers and the distributors with this. So yeah, we don't want to get into them little retail deals. No.
No. Retail inspection is where we would find the product, but we don't interact with the store owner if the product is not registered. We first send a letter to the manufacturer of the product. And we do spend a lot of time in the spring doing that already with different feed, fertilizer, and pesticide products.
Yep. Very good. Kelly?
Sure. So continuing on, this again adds conforming amendments to the existing authority around condemnation and confiscation. And then the rest of this is primarily conforming amendments to Section 379, exchanges between manufacturers, and then 380, administrative penalties. It likewise adds biostimulant plan amendment, soil amendment to the existing administrative penalty authority that the secretary may assess for people who have violated the rules of this chapter, such as not obtaining product registration or not labeling their product appropriately, failing to report the amount and form of each grade of fertilizer that's distributed in Vermont. And then we added a section here that says failed to report or to accurately report the amount and form of each formulation of biostimulant, plant amendment, or soil amendment. So again, adding that to the list of administrative penalties for those who fail to follow these rules. And then we're on.
A question. We still have failure to pay appropriate tonnage fees, so we still have some tonnage fees in fertilizer and lime. Is that where that comes in, Carrie? Is that why that's still in there?
Yeah, you still have a tonnage reporting requirement for fertilizer.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Yep, at the top of page 30, it explicitly exempts on lines 2 to 3 biostimulant, plant amendments, and soil amendments from the tonnage fees.
Yep.
So then we're on the last page here. It just makes some updating changes to the language on 381 about golf courses, just striking that reference to 2012. And then the last section of this draft is the effective date, which states that the act shall take effective on July 1st, 2021.
We need to update that to on passage, right, for our chicken friends?
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to incorporate the two provisions. So we're gonna have a new effective date section.
Okay.
It'll say this section and sections 1 through 8 shall take effect upon passage. The remainder of the bill shall take effect on July 1, 2021.
Yep. Another question, Chris?
Yeah, Carrie, I thought, and it could be my mistake, I've been distracted. But I thought that part of your hope here was to gain some foothold for on-farm plastics. And so am I just misremembering that? I don't see that anywhere in here.
No, you're not, Senator. And we can, in the future, modify the charges of the agency's residual management program. Initially, like I said, I intend to use the funds generated to get a handle on PFAS and PFOA to establish an agricultural risk assessment on those chemicals. You know, when it's used on the soil, what's the risk to the farm? Does it make it to the milk, for instance? But the fees generate about $150,000 a year, and you will be seeing the agency's ag plastic report sometime this session, and that has some opportunities in it. The folks that do recycle plastic in the state would like to see ag plastic balers strategically placed around the state for that bale wraps, for silage covers, and moving ahead in the future, once we wrap our head around the PFOA, PFAS issue, get that dealt with, these funds, in my mind, I could envision them being used to fulfill some of the opportunities highlighted in that plastics report.
Okay.
We don't.
Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I don't think it necessarily needs to be highlighted, but that is where I would envision the residuals management program heading in the future.
And just so I understand, the PFAS and PFOA details you're talking about, those potentially show up in current soil amendment products, and so that's where, because here's where I'm coming from. The Senate's going to be interested in that because we've done a lot of work, obviously, on PFOA, and so I just want to make sure I understand it, particularly for our friends at Senate Natural. So that comes in through the soil amendment registry, is that right?
Yes, yes, it does. The Agency of Natural Resources runs their biosolid Class B biosolid program. If it's not a Class B biosolid and it gets produced or gets processed into an exceptional quality biosolid, the DEC largely loses control. It's no longer done under a permit, and those we don't necessarily know where those products are going. They're just sold in the market as a soil amendment or as a fertilizer. This provides us an opportunity to make sure that those products are not impacting raw ag commodities. Right now, we've got a grant with a lab where we're ready to start analyzing fluid milk. We just have to proceed cautiously.
What about, I don't know if this is even appropriate, but earlier we had a presentation from people from Casella about their DRAP process in Williston, I believe. Who checks on that to make sure that the plastic is getting out of those products that they DRAP and that the waste products are clean of plastic? Do we have somebody that in state government that even has control over that? Do you know, Michael?
Yeah, yes. So they need a solid waste certification to operate because they are managing mandated recyclables and other waste products. So A&R is the entity that issues that certification and oversees its enforcement.
Yeah.
And you will likely, if you just look at the news today, or the one of the facilities has just recently had an administrative penalty assessed on it for a minor violation.
For letting products go
It was
through?
just mishandling a hazardous material at the facility.
Yeah. But that material, I believe, is going into a digester or something, so it's not going to farms anyways, I guess. So Anthony?
Someone had sent me some material around the issue saying that the Casella type program left microplastics in the residuals. I think it was Vermonters for a Clean Environment. I just putting that out there that they had contacted me about their concerns about microplastics in the residuals. I don't know if you've heard anything else about that, Michael.
Uh,
I'm not saying there's anything we can do about it, but
I would recommend that I know a little bit about it, but a little enough to be dangerous. I'd recommend you talk to Kathy about that, about if there's anything that can be done to manage that. Microplastic is a really, really difficult issue. And I don't want to say anything that may be inaccurate.
okay.
Kathy, do you want to comment on that, or are you still with us?
Oops, sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were still here, Kathy. Sorry, I would have entrusted to you.
Right, I was, taking a little break while you were going through the proposed fees. A couple different issues here. So the penalty Michael mentioned was for a household hazardous waste mismanagement at one of the solid waste districts that's separate from what we would call depackaging. I think there will be more discussion in Senate Natural about this issue, but basically when we look at the food waste that we generate in Vermont, which last time we did an assessment, there was about 80,000 tons of food waste that we dispose every year. There's a portion of that, and it's more significant than you might think. I think it's like 37% of that is what we call packaged food. So if we really want to get at the climate change impacts that it comes from disposing of food landfill, we need to address even that portion of food that's packaged. And what we'll see in other states like Massachusetts and others is that there is the technology to separate out the packaging from the food. And that is what is being proposed, actually permitted to be used in Chittenden County for that packaged material. And the food goes one way and the packaging goes another. The packaging then has to be managed separately, and then that liquefied waste does go to a digester.
That help your question, Anthony?
Sure. I mean, it wasn't, I mean, we're doing what we can, I guess, is the answer.
It's like zero
Right.
sort, you know, they have zero sort in Burlington, I believe, Chittenden County. And,
Mhm.
but the, were there any more questions in regards to the farm plastic waste and what Carrie was talking about? And because that is still a pretty big issue amongst our colleagues, and you know, I know farmers are concerned about how to you know, handle that stuff and where they can take it, and we certainly don't need that. If we can't send our little plastic bags to the dump, we certainly don't want 200 feet sheets of corn silage stuff having to go to the dump as well. So Carrie, you guys are onto that, right?
Yes, Senator, and as soon as our ag plastic report is finalized, I'll make sure we get on your agenda.
Yeah. So getting back to our bill, so you think, Michael, by Tuesday, we could get that, those changes in a draft and in the bill form?
Yeah, we'll get it together into a committee bill today. Send it, give it to you. You have to send it to Nadine in drafting operations, because, you know, the chairs are for committee bills are supposed to sign off and give the House and give the committee vote. So we would just ask you to send Nadine an email.
Yeah. So I guess, I mean, we're pretty good on the language. Is everybody fairly happy with the way the bill is at the present? And we'll have to look at that little section that Michael's going to add in. But the other sections, is that all pretty much agreeable with everybody?
Yeah.
Which section was I adding in? The
Pardon?
effective date?
Oh, the change from Kathy, I think, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
that, we've got to add that in, and
Understood.
I think we should look at that as a committee and approve that section, but the other sections, I don't think we have any questions at this point in time, and if there are any, please speak up.
I'm good.
Yep. So, so Michael, I don't know your schedule next week. Can you plan to be with us for a bit on Tuesday morning to wrap this up? And
Yeah, I could be there. right now, anytime between 10 and noon.
Yeah. Well, we'll shoot for 10 o'clock because we want to get this moving. And so I think we're okay with our food scrap bill, chicken bill, fertilizer bill, lime bill. It's really it's grown like heck over the summer and fall. I mean, Carrie, you stay away from this until we get it approved on Tuesday.
Yes, sir.
It's all those healthy soils, you know, the bill just grows really quickly.
Well, I really think that, you know, that it all makes sense now that, you know, we've been through it all, that one complements the other, and of course, working toward better soils and soil amendments. That's, you know, with our ecosystem stuff, that's very important. So I guess, Kathy, want to thank you for all your help working with Carrie, and thank Carrie for you know, your work. It's great that you folks are pulling the wagon, I say, in the same direction, because that's how things should work. And so thanks a lot to both of you. Caroline, are you happy with the way the bill is?
Yes, Senator. So we had yesterday afternoon the opportunity to speak with Carrie and the poultry farmers for compost foraging. So we already had the chance to walk through the language with Carrie directly and have all our questions, lingering questions answered. And at the end of the meeting, we were all excited to see the bill move. So I think we're good.
Yeah.
Hope you could
thank you.
understand me because my internet connection is not that stable.
Yeah.
Get it.
So I guess committee, we're all set on this until we get that language drafted up and get it in the position, and it shouldn't take a long time Tuesday morning to kind of wrap that up. So so thanks a lot, and we'll move on to a different issue. Yeah, we talked a little. You see you, Kathy. We talked a little bit about the slaughterhouse funding issue the other day, and I'm trying to get some numbers from Abby on how much they would need and how soon they could get it out to the facilities to do their expansion. And because down in our money committee, we're talking about doing that early bill on projects that could get started maybe in late April or May, and not having to wait until July 1 and then take a month to get it out the door, and you're right back into fall. So, but I haven't received anything. Have you received anything, Linda, from the agency or from Abby Willard?
I haven't, but I'll follow up on that.
Yeah. And the other issue is Ryan's ecosystems request that he came before us with, and if we could find out from Ryan if he had projects for improving soils and that he could get out the door earlier, I think we could get that one added to that early bill. so that it could happen during planting time and getting soils ready in the spring. A lot of times, if you wait until midsummer, you miss a whole growing season. So, I think I already talked to Linda about pushing Ryan a little bit on getting that over to us. Brian?
Yeah, thank you, Bobby. I'm just wondering, and you know better than anybody here probably, do we need to actually have a bill? We're talking about appropriations, really, right? I mean, can we just write a letter?
Yes, but what I'm talking about, I guess, I'm not talking about bill language. I'd like to get facts and figures that we could put in our letter to send over to Jane in approach, so that, it explains a little bit why we're asking for this early inclusion in the budget stuff.
Okay. I seem to remember the figure of 3 million for the slaughter, but that could be up or down from there. And I don't remember an actual number from Ryan.
250, I think it was, he was asking for. And he had a host of, ideas of where he could use that and move forward on a little bit of a faster track. And I think that would all, we would need to explain that in a short form letter to appropriations. I thought the bill that we got, Senator Ingalls' bill through, that came to us earlier in the week. And then we got blessed with Senator Pearson's bill yesterday. No, we knew that was coming. Michael wanted us to look at that. And on the farm machinery repair bill. And the other issue we got kind of going, and we got to do this with Michael, is the farm labor housing that we heard about from Dan and Buster the other day. Michael, I think, is agreeable to put something in his housing bill that would allow that to, they could apply or whatever to get that done. Chris?
Well, Sorokin is open to us figuring it out. The big chunk of the big slug of money, the 200 million for rental assistance that we'll never be able to spend, is enticing. But Mr. O'Grady and I spent some time, and that feels pretty unlikely. So we are still exploring it. We want to do something. We hope there's some opportunity, but it's not a slam dunk as of right now.
So that's the 200 million, right?
It's very hard to see how that works, because that is truly geared to landlords and renters. And what we're talking about is housing that's part of employment and actually, physically upkeeping or renovating or getting up to code or what have you on farm housing. The 200 million is rental assistance, people that are back pay, those kinds of issues. So
nothing in there about modernizing, fixing up housing at all. It's all just for rent money. And
it's sort of aimed at preventing homelessness, I think, if you had to just.
So buy old motels and remodel them. Yeah. And tear them down in 10 years and take them to the dump. I think
We can compost them.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, the 200 million has significant restrictions on it or criteria. It can only be used for rent, rental arrears, utilities and energy costs, utilities and energies arrears, and other expenses related to housing incurred directly due to COVID. And then there's income eligibility
What
provisions.
does that last part mean, Mike?
Well,
Mike?
remember the original CRF money and the Treasury guidance on what it means to be directly due to COVID. It has to be a response or a cost that you would not have incurred except for COVID. So weatherization and modernization of residential rental housing, it's probably not directly due to COVID.
Oh. Well,
And in addition, there's an income eligibility provision. So you're likely the landlord is not going to qualify because the income provision says it does not exceed 50% of the area median income for the household. So they have to be below the 50% income threshold in the area. So that's going to be a tough one for landlords to hit.
So
Plus, there's a specific provision that says landlords have to apply for their tenants. The landlords don't apply for themselves. They apply for their tenants and for the rent, the utilities, the arrearages. There's not a lot of opportunity for the landlords to use this money for anything other than the traditional cost that the tenant incurs.
is there anything in the bill that allows you to trade that 200 million in for something that's workable? I think they had too many lawyers. No offense, Kelly or Michael, but they had too many lawyers working on this, I think.
well, and it created a dangerous precedent because that money's not free yet. There are still people choosing not to pay their rent who could because they're waiting for this program to come into place.
Yeah.
Right. And another thing, when the landlord applies for the tenant, the landlord has to get the tenant's signature. Right. So that's going to be interesting.
Yeah. That's
Well, and they don't let you even add a fee. Like, I mean, I'm a landlord, but I'm effectively giving about $5,000 worth of loans to two different tenants right now because they're not paying their rent and the program ran out.
yeah, they're hard up, right?
Well,
Yeah.
they're working and they're working just the same they were before COVID.
Yeah, but they could pay before, but COVID has caused them not to be able to pay their rent.
So we're trying to figure out if there's a way to particularly, I like the idea of helping farmers pay for the copay and then grabbing USDA grants for on-farm housing. That was Dan's suggestion, maybe of getting money to go a long way. So we are trying to figure that out, right, Michael?
Yeah. And excuse me, you've got some options about if the copay for the USDA program, you can't necessarily give them money for the copay, but you saw in Harvey Smith's ecosystems services tax credit bill, an opportunity you have here. You can give tax credits for the cost share that they are paying. So you could potentially give a tax credit for that to help that farmer have an incentive to access the USDA program. So
do farmers have any means of using a tax credit for anything? So
well, I guess if they never have income that's taxable, then they wouldn't need the tax credit. You're correct.
Yeah, and the
Um,
way it's been lately, there's probably a few that still could get tax credits, but I bet the vast majority wouldn't qualify. So are there any other means of picking up some funds there that would help with that? So we could get into the USDA funding for upgrading farm labor housing? It-
There's $20 million in one-time money in the governor's proposed budget to VHCB for affordable housing. So I am sure that that's going to be tinkered with, for lack of a better term. But if you wanted to redirect some of that for affordable housing on farms, I think that would fall under the governor. I think that would fall under the governor's intent. And it would address some of the concerns that you heard.
Maybe I spoke with Gus a little bit about that, and I didn't push the issue. I bet that he might be interested in, setting aside a certain amount of money to help upgrade some of this housing. And I wonder if we could work a deal through his program that would open the door to that other federal money that the feds have set aside to help with housing. We might be able to put something together where, get a couple of million from Gus or $1 million, but it would leverage this other federal money through that federal program. Would you want to think about that, Michael?
Yeah, I'm gonna send you all the fact sheet for the program.
For the federal one?
Yeah, for the federal one. And it includes a bunch of references, cross references to the federal rules, but it's not real in depth, but it gives you kind of a little snapshot of what's available. So basically it assists people that can't get commercial credit, that will allow them to charge rents that are affordable to low income tenants. And then it doesn't allow for buying and improving land. It does allow for purchasing like household furnishings, like appliances. So it does allow for the improvement that you're looking for, and it may even be able to pay for construction.
Yeah.
And so it's a loan. You get a pretty good interest rate, 1% at a fixed rate, with a 33-year.
I'd like to borrow money at that rate. Wouldn't our college kids that get student loans like to get hold of some of that 1% money instead of 6 or 8?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
So you get a little snapshot of that. And then I have to dive deeper into the rules about, because there are grants available under it too. I have to dive deeper into that, because there's a 10% minimum cost share there. And I'd have to look at that, and maybe VHCB could leverage money for these grants.
Yeah.
That's where we would really do well if we could pay in 10%, get 90 out of the program. I mean, a little money would go a long ways, and so that
So you're
don't-
sending us that, Michael, and you're continuing to think about it?
Yeah, it's on my list. My list is a little long these days because the House bill drafting deadline is Tuesday, plus the House committees had to get their budget letter to House Appropes today. But it's on my list.
Wednesday's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just
I
kidding.
know.
Yeah, Monday morning would be better. No.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we have a little longer. The House, they're really pushing to get stuff over. So, and they do the heavy lifting first, and then it comes to us. Anything else, Chris?
Yeah, we just got an executive order around the future of agriculture. So I mean, clearly, I would assume that would fall to us to do some analysis. There's a timeline baked into EOs. Is that right, Michael?
90 days.
This is the first I've heard of this. Is it a state or federal EO?
No, it's state. It just came out. We just got the press release while we were meeting.
Oh, I haven't even seen it.
Yeah. It's basically a committee.
Pardon?
It's a committee to look at
Commission.
the future of agriculture commission in Vermont.
I was talking with Anson yesterday morning and he didn't mention anything, but
He's gonna
probably
be the
it's a
guy,
big secret.
Super
he's gonna be
secret.
the guy running it.
Pardon?
He's gonna be the guy running it, Anson.
Yeah, well, that's where it should start.
Sure.
Yeah,
It'll be a good looking report then.
I mean, there's a lot of work to be done there, that's for sure. Maybe, so we'll try to get this stuff wrapped up, the early stuff next week, send over to Appropes. Get our slaughterhouse language down there and our ecosystems language down there. And we'll work on your bill, Chris, after, I guess after crossover, your tractor repair bill, and Senator Ingalls' bill. Think about that one. Collmore, you're gonna report that, mother, if we get it out of committee.
What, Ingalls bill?
Yeah.
Like I said yesterday, I got some reservations. I think Senator Polina does too.
Well, yeah, we need to work on that and get the numbers and weigh it all out and see where we can go with it. But
It's
we'll give
interesting
it-
that nobody else co-sponsored it with him. He's the only one on that bill, I think.
yeah, well, we'll give it a fair shot and try to figure
yeah.
it out.
And I told him this morning in a meeting we had about my reservation, so I'm not speaking behind his back. He knows.
Yeah, well, it's hard, it's hard to put a bill together, that will work and then get it through the process.
Yeah.
So,
What about our schools and all that food, universal lunches?
yeah, we got to get that down to Brian. And I think I had that on the schedule. I think I told Linda that to get that on for Tuesday because I didn't think we would take long to wrap up our chicken bill. And then we could get right on to that.
Good.
Yep. Because that, that's a big issue too. So if there's anything that you run across, Linda will send you copies and updates of the, next week's stuff. But if you run across something you wanna, get on the schedule that I've missed, or be sure and, get hold of Linda and we'll work it in on the list somewheres. But the hot lunch deal, the universal meals thing is going to be pretty busy next week, hopefully, to try to get that down to Brian sometime during the week. Anything else?
Did you guys got an email about this executive order?
Yeah,
I
from
just wanted,
Kendall.
I haven't gotten it yet. Just curious.
From Kendall.
All right, I'll look for it.
Yeah. We'll get ready to go on the floor in a few minutes, and if there isn't anything else, thank you, Michael, for being with us, and Kelly, appreciate your time, and so we'll see you two next week, Tuesday sometime, and we'll see ourselves in a few minutes on the Senate floor. So